MSW Media.
So yeah, now it's clean up on aisle 45 time. And for a long while yet, it is going to be clean up on aisle 45.
Welcome to episode 215 of Clean Up on Aisle 45. It's Wednesday, March 5th, 2025. I'm Allison Gill.
Hey, AG, I'm Harry Dunn. Today we have an update on Special Counsel Hampton Dellinger's wrongful termination case and a mysterious $3 million sitting in who? Mayor Eric Adams' reelection account.
Oh, geez. Can that guy get any more corrupt? Like, is he trying? Like, is he like, no, wait, hold my beer to himself?
At this point, he's definitely trolling us. Like, this has got to be a joke, right?
Oh, jeez. Plus, we have updates on Kenneth Chesebro and Rudy Giuliani. We've got Rudy and the Cheese.
Rudy
back. And it was so funny because on the bonus episode for patrons this past weekend, you were like, Rudy, we got Rudy news.
We got Rudy news. We got Rudy news.
It's exciting to have him back at the end of our show to show off his humiliation. It's always absolutely fun because he deserves every moment of it. So we're going to get into all of this. But first, we have some new patrons to thank. Thank you so much for signing up to support independent media and support me and Harry. To Paula M., Lori Capron, Sherry Kennedy, Tommy Gran, and Sassy and Smartazzy, which I really
love that. Thank you all. Thank you.
I had a friend on an old message board back in the 90s. Remember the internet in the 90s? And
yeah, absolutely.
I think her signature was bomb diggity, mo figgity, rock you like a scorpion's hurricane. I think was her.
Oh my gosh, the fact that you remember that, that definitely stands out. So I would remember something like that too.
Yeah, my stupid brain doesn't rember what I did yesterday, but I remember her sign off in the 90s on the message boards.
That is so awesome.
Oh, I don't know. I'm going to donate my brain to science so people could figure out what's wrong with it. All right, Harry, let's start with good old Eric Adams. Then we'll move on to Hampton Dellinger, who's just a badass.
Yeah.
And then, like I said, we'll end with Rudy and the Cheese. So the following reporting comes from Joe Anuda at Politico. A mysterious $3 million chunk of money is sitting in Mayor Eric Adams' reelection account. It's the latest irregularity. It's a nice way of saying the latest WTF. Giving campaign finance officials cause to deny him crucial public matching funds. Now, I don't know how much this is going to matter because he's getting trounced in the polls right now.
Yeah.
But the Campaign Finance Board broadened the criteria it used to deny Adams matching funds in a February 18th letter that Politico obtained through a FOIA request. Go FOIA.
Mm-hmm.
The board nixed Eric Adams' ask for $4.5 million in taxpayer-funded campaign money in December and has renewed its decision monthly. Like every month he's like, how about now? And they're like, nah.
Nope.
Bitch. How about now? Nah.
Nope.
So here's a quote. The campaign is not eligible for payment because the difference between the campaign's reported receipts and documented receipts is equal to or greater than 10%. The discrepancy was indeed greater. It's 65%.
Wow.
There is a 65% difference in what he's saying he has and what he actually has.
Wow.
So in its February update, the CFB cited for the first time a significant difference between money in the campaign's coffers and what it has disclosed in official reports.
Yeah, 65% is more than just, oops, I made a mistake here. That's flat out corruption, lying. That wasn't just, I added an extra zero by accident. As of December 31st, the campaign's bank records showed receipts totaling $7.5 million, according to the board's latest review of Adams' campaign paperwork, which Politico obtained via a separate records request. Yet, the mayor's team only reported around $4.6 million in contributions to the board, a number that roughly matches figures posted to the CFB's public website that left nearly $3 million unaccounted for.
So where did the $3 million
Where is that $3
come
million?
from? Did it come from Blavatnik, who donated to Rudy Giuliani's, Michael Cohen's Essential Consulting? Did it come from, straw donors? who can't make legal contributions? Did it come from maybe the Turkish consulate bribing him to put his stacks of stuff at the top?
That sounds likely, though.
Yeah,
that one actually sounds likely.
But to be like, oh yeah, we actually have $7.5 million, but we're only going to tell you about 4.6 million of it is shady AF.
Yeah.
We used to have a game on the old Mueller, She Wrote podcast called Sketch or Nah. And it even had a little jingle, Harry. It was, do you think he broke the law? It's time to play Sketch or Nah. And
okay. I think we need a new jingle. That is awesome. I like that. That's awesome.
Thank you. So this highly unusual situation comes as Eric Adams is embroiled in intertwined legal, financial, and political crises. He is struggling to raise money for his lawyer's fees as his federal criminal case lags on. We know that there's now been a appointed amicus curiae in his case that Judge Dale Ho has said, give me a brief arguing against what both Trump's DOJ and Eric Adams wants, and he needs that by March 7th. So there's not only that, which is expensive, there's the campaign's irregular bookkeeping. There's criminal allegations laid out in a federal bribery case that have been fueling the board's rationale for continuing to deny him the matching funds that would help him considerably with his long-shot reelection bid. The CFB matches certain donations from New York City residents in an effort to encourage small dollar contributions. It's a little bit of socialism to get people who might not do as well fundraising to be able to compete with the big dogs.
Yeah.
The board also performs oversight of campaigns raising and spending, but declined to comment on the February 18th letter.
Adams' campaign obviously did not respond to a request to explain the 3 million. Hey, Eric, we got any no comments. That $3 million sum that could represent actual cash in the bank or a paperwork error. But the team is required to submit a response to the board by March 17th and will have an opportunity to rectify mistakes in subsequent filings. Paperwork mistakes, not money that they just magically showed up somewhere.
Yeah, I always have $3 million paperwork mistakes.
Yeah,
it's like every day.
So this is going to be interesting. The February letter cites more than a dozen statutes the board believes are relevant to its decision denying Adams matching funds. A similar letter sent in January cited only 6.
Dozens. They should really just say, bro, you're not going to win. Like, don't even stop. Like, just back out of the race. Quit asking me for money. So that expanded reasoning effectively nudges a multi-million public windfall, which is further out of Adams's reach, even as Trump's Justice Department attempts to clear the mayor's electoral path. Now, in reaching its conclusions, CFB has relied in part on a September indictment alleging that Adams solicited illicit campaign contributions, charges that the mayor has denied. And earlier this month, DOJ officials moved to dismiss the charges, as we've talked about. If successful, a dismissal could complicate the CFB's justifications for nixing Adams's payout, though acting Deputy Attorney General Emil Beauvais did not opine on the merits of the case and left open the possibility of reviving it after the mayoral election. So I guess what they're getting at here is that if the judge does dismiss these charges, like let's say he decides to dismiss them with prejudice and take whatever advice Paul Clement, who the amicus curiae is, if Paul Clement comes in and says, go ahead and dismiss him, but do it with prejudice, or he might come in and say, don't dismiss him. But if the judge does dismiss him, what they're saying here in this Politico article is that could make it harder for the campaign finance board to not match his donations. But then you would have New Yorkers giving $4.5 million in campaign assistance to Eric Adams, who is, again, not going to win this race.
Yeah, at all. While the loss of $4.5 million has left the mayor without the needed funds to run a functional citywide campaign, he's facing an even bigger threat. Bigger threat than losing $4.5 million? What could it be? Citing the same criminal case and accounting infractions, the CFB has floated the idea that Adams could be in breach of contract, the board's most serious penalty, and one that could require the mayor to return around $10 million in public matching funds he received during his last run.
Wow. Okay, that'll be interesting. The board's latest analysis of the 2025 campaign again found widespread accounting errors that could impact that decision. Between October and January, the CFB found nearly half of the contributions the campaign earmarked for public matching funds were improperly reported and thus invalid. That's a similar share to the previous reporting period, which a December report in the Daily News found to be abnormally high. So now, paperwork error, theft. What is it? It's corrupt. It's shady. It's sketch, right?
Yeah.
If we do sketch or not. But it'll be interesting to see, just in a few days here, this Friday, that amicus curiae brief is due from Paul Clement, who was appointed by Judge Dale Ho to argue why he should not dismiss the case under a Rule 48A motion to dismiss the charges, the bribery and fraud charges. And everybody kind of keeps leaving out the fact that even if you hate Damian Williams and you think he's corrupt AF for bringing these bribery and fraud charges, Danielle Sassoon, former clerk for Scalia, conservative as all get out, was going to impanel a grand jury and bring conspiracy to obstruct justice charges against him, having found that he told people to destroy evidence and lie to the FBI, and that this super conservative person had the evidence to back that up, regardless of what you think of the previous, weaponized Biden DOJ, right?
Yeah.
This is not who that is. And I feel like leaving that out, that is such a, like you and I talked about it, that crime, obstructing justice and a conspiracy to obstruct justice, it strikes at the heart of our law and order.
Yeah, it absolutely does. That's interesting to you. One of the things that out of this is interesting to me, or that I feel like would be the best outcome, is the one we just talked about, Eric Adams being in breach of contract.
Yeah.
And now him just losing the election. Yeah, I think that's, a little bit of justice, obviously, since he's, potentially not going to be charged for, what the DOJ brought the Biden DOJ brought charges against him. But him having to pay back $10 million of taxpayer money. I feel like that, and him coupled with him losing the election, would be a little bit of justice, poetic justice, a little bit to the citizens of New York. Since, obviously he's not, right now, not going to jail for corruption charges and obstruction of justice charges.
Yeah. And we're going to have a discussion a little bit later in the show when we talk about what's going on with Ken Chesebro about what justice looks like. And I have found over the last 8 years of following all of the trials and tribulations and literal trials of Trump and his allies, that the best, most satisfying justice doesn't come from getting a conviction or an indictment. We can talk about the 34 felony count indictment. Yeah. Everyone just sort of shrugged it off. We can talk about what happened to Manafort and what happened to Flynn and what happened to Van der Zwaan and all of these people who were indicted and or went to prison under the first Trump regime. We could talk about what happened to Trump and what didn't happen to Trump. But to me, the biggest justice comes from stuff like this breach of contract, return your $10 million, the Freeman and Moss against Rudy Giuliani. Like, I kind of don't care if he gets convicted and does 4 months in Arizona for the 2020 scheme. It's not as satisfying as the $148 million settlement in the civil suit that came, or for E. Jean Carroll, that kind of $90 million justice, or from what Tish James took him through with the $450 something million fraud case. Like, I find that justice shows itself in other ways. Now, do I wish our system of justice in the courts treated everyone on the same level playing field, and we got some satisfaction of seeing like Trump behind bars? Yes, absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely.
But like, even Weisselberg only went to jail for 100 days. Like, this is just, it never turns out the way you want it to. And I think people were relying too heavily on some sort of tackle and shackle showdown with an orange jumpsuit on all these guys. But the real justice comes in other ways, I think. And we're going to talk about that later.
I agree.
In the show.
And to add one more example, the Fox News justice, that lawsuit, like close to $1 billion worth of justice there. Mm-hmm. That's what it looks like. Because, people will I mean, not normal people. I mean, what's 100 days in jail? I mean, I don't say that lightly. What's 100? I don't want to do it.
No, right.
Nobody wants to do it, right? But people would jump at that in a heartbeat rather than having to pay close to $1 billion and watch your every statement for the rest of your everlasting life. That justice looks a little bit better than 100 days in jail. So,
yeah. And that's why for me, with the whole January 20th case and what justice looked like there, for me, justice was an indictment, and that we got to see what the crimes were and what the evidence was. And we got to see all that, because had he gone to trial and added 4 more felony counts to his conviction, which probably would have never happened because the Supreme Court wouldn't have let it. But like, of course, the voters, like, you're telling me they're going to be like 34 felony convictions? Okay. 38? No way. Like, that just doesn't. Yeah. And he wouldn't have probably served that much jail time. I don't know what the sentencing guidelines would have looked like.
I like the embarrassment. a little more, especially for somebody like Donald Trump.
But we did get all the information and the facts. It's just sometimes the media doesn't tell us all about that.
Yeah.
They care more about the guilty, not guilty, jail, the show. So anyway, we'll get into that later. But first, we're going to talk about Hampton Dellinger.
Hampton Dellinger.
Unlikely hero of the month. And we're going to talk about him right after this quick break. So stick around. We'll be right back.
Hey, y'all. Welcome back. When we last spoke about our friend with the cool name, Special Counsel Hampton Dellinger, his job had just been reinstated by Judge Amy Berman Jackson through a temporary restraining order against Trump. And after he was back on the job, he had requested that the Merit Service Protection Board reinstate 6 probationary employees that he felt were wrongfully terminated.
Yep, exactly. And now we have learned that the Merit System Protection Board, MSPB, if you're nasty, granted Hampton Dellinger's stay request to reinstate these 6 employees. Yeah. The MSPB member that granted it was Biden appointee Raymond Lyman. I'm not sure how to pronounce it, but he wrote this in his decision. I find that there are reasonable grounds to believe that each of the 6 agencies engaged in a prohibited personnel practice. Based on the foregoing, granting Office of Special Counsel stay request is appropriate. Accordingly, a 45-day stay of the employee's probationary termination is granted. The stay shall be in effect from February 25th through and including April 10th. It is further ordered as follows. 1. During the pendency of this stay, these employees shall be placed in the positions they held prior to the termination. Number 2, the agency shall not effect any changes in the employee's duties or responsibilities that are inconsistent with the employee's salary or grade level, or impose on the employees any requirement which is not required of other employees of comparable position, salary, or grade level. And that, number 2 there, that really personally makes me go, heck yeah. Because when I was brought back from my job, but when they tried to get rid of me at first, way back in 2019, they tried to make me do work that was well below my pay grade to sort of degrade me and humiliate me and punish me. They tried to set like super restrictive rules on me alone and not on anyone else who was similarly situated as me. And so the fact that they put that in there and recognize that you don't do that, it's a bad thing. I'm like, it makes me feel like I'm less gaslighted.
Yeah.
Number 3, within 5 working days of this order, 5 days, the agency shall submit evidence to the clerk of the board showing that it has complied with this order. Number 4, any request for an extension must be received by the clerk of the board and the agency, together with any further evidentiary support on or before March 26th, 2025. So very good ruling here.
Yeah.
I was hoping Kathy Harris would get this. She was also reinstated by temporary restraining order after being fired from the Merit Systems Protection Board, but it went to this Raymond Lyman guy.
Yeah, I like bullet number 3 that says within 5 working days of this order, the agency shall submit evidence to show this complied. This kind of reminds me of the emails that Elon is saying, hey, tell me your work. What did you accomplish this week? And show me your work. So I'm glad that they are making them show them that, hey, we have complied with this. Our buddy, Hampton Dellinger, released a statement regarding the ruling. He said, I am very grateful to the MSPB has agreed to postpone these 6 terminations. These stays represent a small sample of all the probationary employees who have been fired recently. So our work is far from done. That's good to hear. He's got more to do. He goes on to say agency leaders should know that OSC will continue to pursue allegations of unlawful personnel actions, which can include asking MSPB for relief for a broader group of fired probationary employees.
Nice.
I urge agency leaders to voluntarily and immediately rescind any and every unlawful termination of probationary employees. Badass.
Yeah. So, and he had said that in his original statement that we read last week. He's like, even though this is just 6 people, we're trying to find a way to how this would apply to a broader group of probationary fired employees without them having to file individual complaints with the Office of Special Counsel. And here I'm urging you, the leaders, voluntarily to rescind any and every unlawful termination based on what just happened here. So that was a major win. And then on the same day that Judge Amy Berman Jackson held a hearing to determine whether she would issue a more permanent restraining order, which is called a preliminary injunction, she extended the temporary restraining order by 3 days, right?
Yeah.
So that gives her time to make the decision, because the hearing happened the same day that it was the restraining order was going to expire. She's like, I need 3 more days to write this up and make my decision. And meanwhile, Trump is pissed, so he asks the D.C. Circuit Court of Appeals to vacate her temporary restraining order. But they say, nah, bro, temporary restraining orders aren't appealable. So then Trump runs to the Supreme Court. His daddy's on the Supreme Court, as we discussed. And they kicked the can down the road, too. Then Trump's acting Solicitor General, Sarah Harris, wrote a letter to the Supreme Court to complain about what Hampton Dellinger had done with these probationary employees, which is weird because it's not a motion. She's not asking for anything. It's just like I'd like to speak to your manager.
Yeah, I was just about to say, she went full Karen right there.
Yeah, she
No
did.
offense to any Karens listening.
No offense to Karen. And in this letter, she says, although respondent had told this court that he is an inferior officer subject to the MSPB's supervision, he told the MSPB that the board must grant the special counsel's request for a stay unless the special counsel's claim is inherently unreasonable. Yeah, lady, that's the law. In short, a fired special counsel is wielding executive power over the elected executive's objection to halt the employment decisions made by other executive agencies. No, again, that's the law. The OSC shall do this and the MSPB shall do that.
Yeah.
That's not wielding executive power. That's executing laws passed by Congress, right? She goes on to say the MSPB, the entity that respondent argues is responsible for supervising him, is deferring to his stay requests so long as the requests are rational. Yeah, again, the law. The MSPB, moreover, is being led by a chairman who has herself been fired by the president only to be reinstated by a district court. Yeah, the law. I would appreciate it if you would circulate this letter to members of the Supreme Court. That was her ask. Just please share this with your friends.
That is so, I'm calling the manager. My gosh, like you just said, this wasn't a motion. This wasn't any.
She can't come to the barbecue. That's the lady on the phone at the barbecue.
Absolutely. She is upset. Oh, well, cry. What did they say? Cope harder, whatever.
Yeah, boo-hoo.
Then get this. Close to midnight on the day the extended temporary restraining order was set to expire, this is the restraining order keeping Hampton Dellinger in his job. Judge Amy Berman Jackson, she granted the preliminary injunction keeping him in the job while the litigation plays out. And within an hour, Trump's DOJ, of course, appealed to the D.C. Circuit Court of Appeals.
Right. And that's okay because preliminary injunctions are appealable. So,
not the temporary restraining orders, though.
Just wait 3 days.
Just wait, guys.
Jeez. I saw a wino eating grapes. I was like, dude, you have to wait.
That was good. Okay, that was good.
Joke.
Yeah, that was
so
good.
Now this will go up to the Supreme Court pretty quickly. Probably by next week, we should have a decision. But Amy Berman Jackson has ruled that Trump illegally fired Hampton Dellinger. She wasn't just like, yeah, I can see that Hampton Dellinger might win on the merits, so I'm going to grant a temporary restraining order. Now she's like, I'm blocking this during the pendency of this litigation because Hampton Dellinger was illegally fired. She said there is no dispute that the statute establishing Office of Special Counsel provides that special counsel may be removed by the president only for inefficiency, neglect of duty, or malfeasance in office. No one disputes that. And that the curt email from the White House informing the special counsel he was terminated contained no reason whatsoever. The court will grant the plaintiff's motion, that's Dellinger, and enter a judgment in his favor. And Trump's motion for summary judgment is denied, right? Because Trump was like, just say no. And he's like, yeah, no, I'm saying no to your no. But I think that's really interesting that, all he really had to do here was to give a reason. And then they probably wouldn't have been able to question it.
Yeah.
Kind of like how with the, there was some other, with the dismissal of the Eric Adams case, right? He was like, well, because we need him to do what we say. It was like the reason.
Yeah. Well, that's the thing. There isn't a reason here.
But
you just don't want people investigating them.
But if Bove had, brain cell 1 and that huge melon on top of his head, he'd be living the sweet life in the beautiful San Fernando Valley. No, okay, Ghostbusters reference. No, he would have said, we think this is insufficient evidence, or we think that this doesn't meet the criteria or the elements of these particular crimes. And we don't think that the bribery charge applies here because the Supreme Court gutted the bribery charge a couple years ago. All he had to do was say that, and there probably wouldn't be a problem. But because he was like, no, we need him to do what we say or we're going to indict him again, admitted to a quid pro quo. It's like, just do the bare minimum. And you could probably avoid all this. Anyway, the judge goes on, the defendants Trump takes the position that the statutory provision is unconstitutional and should be struck down rather than enforced. They insist that the President of the United States must have control over the head of this small federal agency as he does over all administrative agencies, notwithstanding the fact that the focus of the Office of Special Counsel is super narrow and it's got a negligible impact on private actors or any sector of the economy. Plaintiff does not agree with that. That's Hampton Dellinger. Congress did not disagree with that. It enshrined presidential control in the statute by providing that he may remove special counsel for the 3 relatively broad but specified reasons. Trump maintains, though, that the Constitution demands that the president should just have unfettered authority to fire him for no reason at all. So no one is saying Trump can't fire the guy. We're just saying you have to give a reason, and you didn't give one. And now you're just hemming and hawing and writing letters to the manager instead of just giving a reason.
They don't have one.
No. Well,
they don't have one.
They can make one up even probably and get further than they have here.
But I feel like that goes against their reasoning for doing all like that goes against Trump's core. No, I can do it because I'm the president.
Right. And
that's
I think
what he believes in.
He might actually get that ruling, but we'll go over some of Judge Berman Jackson's reasoning after we take this quick break. So, before we go to the break, Harry, this ruling by Amy Berman Jackson, it's big, it's long, right? She goes into depth.
Yeah.
And I'm surprised. I'm not surprised. I'm blown away. I'm impressed by her ability to write this up and, with just a few days of an extended restraining order to get this preliminary injunction filed. But there are really interesting things about whether or not this law that bars the president from firing him without cause is constitutional, right? Because it feels like the Supreme Court would say, no, a president can do what he wants.
Sure. Yeah. No, we're going to read some of the ruling when we get back from this break, but you're 100% right. And that's what Trump wants.
Yeah. And the Supreme Court's going to have to overturn what Judge Amy Berman Jackson says here if they want to side with Trump. So we'll go over that right after this break. Stick around. We'll be right back.
All right, y'all, welcome back. Right before the break, we were talking about this ruling. And, one of the things, AG, I think that her ruling, it's so thorough, it's so complete because she knew that this is going to the Supreme Court. So she want to make sure she's on her A game too. So let's dig deeper into her ruling. She goes on, she says, the question presented in this case is whether it is unconstitutional and unconstitutional intrusion on the president's Article 2 powers to say that he may remove the special counsel for reasons related to his performance, but he cannot do it on a whim or out of personal animus. It is an extremely narrow question with little or no precedential value given the unique nature of the Office of Special Counsel and the fact that there is no longer any other agency with a single head protected by similar restrictions in the executive branch.
Okay, so here she's setting this up saying, hey, there's not a lot of case law out there. We would actually have to look at previously fired without cause special counsels from the Office of Special Counsel, because this is a very unique position in that it is the only agency head in the executive branch that is protected by these, you have to fire for cause, right? All other jobs protected by that are lower level. Like Merit Systems Protection Board members, National Labor Relations Board members. The Postmaster General has a whole board who decides, right? And so that's a different situation. So because this is really unique, a tiny agency, and because it provides oversight, it's different here. And that's going to be important. And this is a point that Steve Vladeck was making when he said, that how the Supreme Court rules in this case doesn't necessarily apply to all the other fired people that have to be fired for cause. She goes on to say the court finds that the statute is not unconstitutional, and it finds that the elimination of the restrictions on the plaintiff's removal would be fatal to the defining and essential feature of the Office of Special Counsel as it was conceived by Congress and signed into law by the president, its independence. The court concludes that they must stand. So if you strip out these requirements, it strips out the independence, which goes against the law.
Yeah.
And then you're in a separation of powers territory. She says a review of both the statutory provisions setting out the powers and functions of this Office of Special Counsel and the history of the legislation establishing special counsel and the terms of his tenure reveals that his independence is inextricably intertwined with the performance of his duties. Special counsel's job is to look into and expose unethical or unlawful practices directed at federal civil servants, and to help ensure that whistleblowers who disclose fraud, waste, and abuse on the part of government agencies can do so without suffering reprisals. It would be ironic, to say the least, and inimical to the ends furthered by the statute, if the special counsel himself could be chilled in his work by fear of arbitrary or partisan removal. That is her very fancy legal way of saying what I said last week. Like how we have a guy wrongfully terminated whose job it is to protect the wrongfully terminated.
How ironic, like she said.
She's great. She's like, and inimical to the ends furthered by the statute. I was like, all right, fancy.
Wow, okay.
Fancy. She says this case does not present the affront to the president Article 2 authority that Trump is insinuating. In recent cases, what troubled the court were restrictions on the president's ability to remove an official who wields significant executive authority. Special counsel does not wield significant executive authority. He can't bring a case in court on behalf of the United States. He can't impose a disciplinary sanction on behalf of the United States. He can't demand payment on behalf of the United States. He can't promulgate a regulation on behalf of the United States, nor can he issue a decision on behalf of the United States. Special counsel acts as an ombudsman, a clearinghouse for complaints and allegations, and after looking into them, he can encourage the parties to resolve the matter among themselves, and if that fails, he must direct them to go elsewhere. The buck does not stop with him. And along the way, while he is required to inform the president of certain findings, the statute also specifically directs him to report directly to Congress. This is not significant executive authority. It is hardly executive authority at all.
Wow. Smackdown.
Right.
But wait, there's more. She goes on to say, in sum, it would be antithetical to the very existence of this particular government agency and position to vindicate the president's Article 2 power, a constitutional license to bully officials in the executive branch into doing his will. She then gives a detailed history of the establishment of the Office of Special Counsel and cites all the laws that support it. Then she discusses the special counsel's very narrow authority and all the limitations that show it doesn't have broad powers, that a president needs to be able to fire without cause.
Yeah, she goes in depth. Boy, if you ever wanted to learn all about the history of the Office of Special Counsel, this is the ruling for you. Because then she outlines the legal standard for preliminary injunctions, which we also get to learn, unless you've read a bunch of legal standards for preliminary injunctions. And she talks about why Hampton Dellinger meets that standard. She also goes over the legal standard for summary judgment and why Trump failed to meet that standard. You know, that's why she granted what Dellinger wanted and denied what Trump wanted. And then she goes on to talk about the points that she made in her introduction. Special counsel doesn't wield any real power, executive power. So he's not infringing on Trump's king status. And that the law demonstrates why special counsel being independent is imperative. It's inextricably linked. You can't take those two things apart and continue to follow the law passed by Congress. And she wraps up with why she has the legal authority to enter this judgment, right? Because you have to always say, here's why I'm allowed to do this as a judge. And then she concludes, for all the reasons set forth above, the court will enter a judgment in favor of Hampton Dellinger on count 1, and it will award the declaratory and injunctive relief set forth in the accompanying order. So really, really very thorough, thoughtful ruling, because Harry, what you and I talked about, like when this goes up to the Supreme Court, what I was worried about is that because Hampton Dellinger is an agency head, that Trump would say he serves at the pleasure of the president and I should be able to fire him. And that the Supreme Court would say that any law saying that I have to meet certain criteria in order to fire him is unconstitutional. It takes away from my kingness, right? And I think she makes a really incredible argument here that this position is so unique that even though it is an agency head, his focus is so narrow. He doesn't have any executive powers. All that whole list of shit he can't do, like that doesn't make him somebody that you should be able to just fire without cause, or that basically that doesn't make the law that says you have to fire him for a reason unconstitutional.
Yeah, I think one of the things that's going to play out, and that's going to be, I think that the Supreme Court will stay this decision and allow it to remain, mainly because of this, which you read earlier in the ruling, which it says, while he is required to inform the president of certain findings, the statute also specifically directs him to report directly to Congress. So I think that is the sticking point in the ruling. That's the one that stuck out to me, but I'm not a Supreme Court justice either.
And if the Supreme Court wants to allow him to fire without cause and declares that statute unconstitutional, the statute that says you have to give cause if you're going to fire a special counsel, the Supreme Court's going to have to twist itself into a pretzel again, which it does all the time, in order to explain how they can pull the independence out of the law, out of the history, the long history of this law and how it was written and the intent with which it was written. They'll have to just steamroll over all that and say, no, this very independent, non-executive power guy serves at the pleasure of the president, even though he reports to Congress. And it'll be very fascinating because it's so without precedent, right? Because this is the only position that's like this in the executive branch, to see how they're going to justify that. Now, I said the same thing about immunity. How could you possibly justify immunizing a president? But they did it anyway, and they used really shady ways to do it.
Do you believe that there's a world where the Supreme Court is watching what's happening? Well, they are. Obviously, they know what's happening. And do some of those people who express, mild concerns, not lukewarm concerns about the immunity ruling, do you think that there's a world where Amy Coney Barrett. Amy Coney Barrett, geez, can't confuse those two, says, you know what, we tried to say maybe he'll do the right thing and we see what he's doing now. And this is, maybe this is just wishful thinking,
Well, she actually did oppose part of the ruling.
Part of it. That's what I'm saying. She expressed lukewarm concern to certain
Susan Collins level concern.
I'm a little concerned, Did she feel enough concern with seeing what Donald Trump is doing now. With the immunity ruling, that was kind of like, well, he hasn't done anything yet. So we'll see. But now he's already displaying what he is doing. I don't know. There's what do they call it? A test case already that Donald Trump is already doing. So I don't know. Wishful thinking, I guess,
No, and, we'll see. They may, Roberts wanted to immunize Trump well before they even heard oral arguments. All that was exposed, that corruption, and he took the case for himself to do so. But in this particular case,
he's a scumbag, man.
He is.
God, dog.
He is.
He's a scumbag.
If they let Trump run roughshod over the Constitution fully, then they run the risk of him gutting the Supreme Court's power. But then on the other hand, if the Supreme Court rules against him, the Supreme Court runs the risk of having him ignore a Supreme Court order or a Supreme Court ruling. So, I mean,
yeah.
Wish in one hand and shit in the other, but this is the bed they made for themselves.
I know. I think that's what it gets at. I mean, they've already been, the members of Congress saying the court are wrong and the president should be able to not go with these rulings. J.D. Vance has, talked about we're going to do like Andrew Jackson and ignore the rulings of the court. And listen, the signs are there. And like I said, like you've said many times, they have created this monster. And you know what? It's up to them. Well, not even up to them. Y'all figure it out. Y'all do it. Y'all created this. Y'all fix it. We're tired of helping you all.
Yeah, but in the meantime, Hampton Dellinger's job could be. Here's what's gonna. And let's just look a little bit down the road, right? Let's say the Supreme Court, miracle of miracles, is like, the law is constitutional. We're going to let that stand, because when they decided that the funding mechanism for the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau was constitutional, they were citing a couple of case laws. Those were the laws that Amy Berman Jackson was citing, saying that in these particular cases, the head of the CFPB actually does wield quite a bit of executive power. And that was their only argument, and they still lost. And here, this guy has like 1/10 of the power, the head of the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau.
Yeah.
But miracle of miracles. If they do, let me just tell you what is probably going to happen. The Trump administration will go, fine. Well, then we're firing him for cause, and they'll find some cause, and they'll put it in there, and then just do it. Having saved all that time in litigation, because a lot of this is show. A lot of this is performative. A lot of this is putting Hampton Dellinger through being fired, being reinstated, paying for a lawyer, filing things in court. A lot of that is the punishment in and of itself. And so that's why, rather than Trump just coming in and pardoning Eric Adams, he wants to go through this whole thing, with the courts, to punish the courts and the taxpayers' dime paying for all of this, rigmarole. And that's why he's going through all of this instead of just giving a reason.
Yeah.
That's
what gets exhausting. So
because he's not spending his own money on these lawsuits anymore. He's spending our money.
He's spending the taxpayers' money. And that's what gets exhausting, when you don't have the resources or the means or the energy to fight back. And that's what they want to do, bully you into submission. And shout out to Hampton Dellinger for refusing to obey in advance, as we got to know that phrase over the last couple of weeks. So.
Yeah. And by the way, the D.C. Circuit Court of Appeals, Trump's already appealed, like you said. They have a deadline at noon today for Dellinger to respond to the Trump administration's request to stay the ruling. So the panel is Karen Henderson, a G.H.W. Bush appointee, Patricia Millett, an Obama appointee, and Justin Walker, a Trump appointee. So could get interesting.
Should get interesting.
But if Hampton Dellinger loses because of the Trump and Bush appointees, I'm sure he'll appeal en banc to the entire D.C. Circuit and win that, and then head up to the Supreme Court. If I were him, I would drag this out as long as I possibly could.
Sure. I'm with you.
Sit in a seat until SCOTUS has to hear about it.
Yep.
But yeah, speaking of, sometimes it's just best for your mental health to walk away. That's why we're all wondering what Ruby Freeman and Shane Moss got like in their settlement. Like sometimes it's just best to put it to bed. But we have a little more information on that, plus something with Ken Chesebro. But we have to take one last quick break. Stick around. We'll be right back. Hey, everybody. Welcome back. All right. Judge McAfee. Remember him, the judge down in Fulton County? The old Fani Willis case. It's not hers right now. That's still going through court. Judge McAfee has granted Kenneth Chesebro's motion for early termination of his probation. That's the probation he got for pleading guilty to the conspiracy to overturn the 2020 election. He pled guilty on one count. It says, comes now, defendant Kenneth Chesebro, by and through undersigned counsel, and hereby requested this honorable court to grant early termination and discharge of the defendant's first offender probation. The Fulton County District Attorney's Office doesn't oppose this request. Fani Willis doesn't have a problem with this. The defendant was placed on first offender probation October 30th, 2023. Defendant has provided proof of completion of the special conditions of probation to the Fulton County DA's office. As part of this consent order, defendant Chesebro is withdrawing his motion for habeas corpus relief, which was premised upon the court's prior ruling as to the constitutionality of count 15 of the indictment. Remember when he was like, when that count was dismissed, he was like, ooh, I want to take back my guilty plea.
Yeah.
And he was trying to fight that. Well, he stopped fighting that and instead said, let me get off probation early. He says, wherefore it is hereby ordered the defendant's first offender probation is hereby terminated as of the date of this order. So he served, October 30th, 2023, about a year and a half of probation.
About that, yeah.
Wherefore it's further ordered and directed that in accordance with the provision of the Probation and First Offenders Act, that this discharge shall completely exonerate the defendant of any criminal purpose, that this discharge shall not affect any of said defendant's civil rights or liberties. The defendant shall not be considered to have ever had a criminal conviction, and this discharge may not be used to disqualify Chesebro in any application for employment or appointment to office, either the public or private sector. So, off probation, expunged, donezo. And Fani Willis didn't oppose.
Yeah, but the court of public opinion still knows the cheese as Swiss cheese. He's
still got trouble other places right now.
He's still got other things. But I mean, listen, I'm all for criminal justice reform and, once somebody's done their time and allow them to be, serving members of society. I'm not going to be a hypocrite when I say that I believe people once they've paid your debt to society and get back out there and,
but
be a contributing.
Not every Georgian is getting that kind of relief.
That's where I was going. It's not fair across the board, though. Mm-hmm. And that's the problem. And only people with rich ass lawyers and what appears to be rich white men and women, most of the time men, get the opportunities that the cheese is being afforded right now. And that's where DEI comes in. Equity, inclusion, my God. So
and accessibility to the justice system.
Absolutely.
If I were a public defender in Georgia, I would be citing this for every one of my clients who pled guilty and want early probation. And I would be asking the court to explain why my client doesn't get it, but this client does.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So, yeah. Well, that's the cheese news. So
guess what? Guess who's next?
Guess who's next? Our butt, Rudy. So now it's time for a Rudy update. From the BBC, Rudy Giuliani has fully satisfied the $148 million defamation judgment he owed two former Georgia election workers, court documents show. The election workers, Ruby Freeman and her daughter, Shay Moss, successfully sued Giuliani, President Donald Trump's former lawyer, for defamation after he claimed they committed ballot fraud during the 2020 election. They were compensated on Friday, court documents filed in Manhattan federal court show, following a January settlement agreement that allowed Giuliani to keep his New York and Florida homes. The court documents did not say how much compensation the election workers received.
Yeah, and I'm dying to know, because those Florida and New York homes were worth like $8 million, and then there was another couple million, in stuff. But as we know, in January, Moss and Freeman agreed to forego a trial and allow Giuliani to keep his belongings in exchange for compensation and his promise to shut the frick up. Like, don't ever defame us again. They say, quote, "We've reached an agreement and can now move forward with our lives." And that kind of goes back to what you were saying a little bit earlier, Harry. That's what the women said in January. And they called the past 4 years a living nightmare. Meanwhile, Giuliani said the agreed settlement did not involve an admission of liability or wrongdoing. At the time, none of the parties involved disclosed the details of the agreement. We still don't know. And prior to the settlement, there were a handful of belongings that Giuliani had been asked to hand over. A dozen luxury watches, Mercedes-Benz, once owned by Lauren Bacall, his $6 million Manhattan apartment, autographed Joe DiMaggio baseball jersey. That came after a 2023 jury, as we know, awarded Freeman and Moss nearly $150 million in damages following. It was just a 4-day trial, Harry. But that's because the judge had already determined, because Rudy wouldn't hand anything over, that he was basically pretty much guilty, and they only had to decide on the damages.
Yeah. So it was kind of like already foregone that that he was responsible. He did defame them, but now they were just talking about the, like you just said, the awards and stuff like that. But Giuliani was among several Trump allies who spread false claims of election fraud in an effort to overturn Trump's loss to former President Joe Biden in 2020. His false claims about Ms. Moss and Ms. Freeman caused them to receive death threats and forced them into hiding, they said.
That was heartbreaking when they showed Ruby Freeman's testimony that she gave up on the big screen during the hearings. I was sitting there in the front row with you. And then to hear Shay Moss give live testimony to the panel, it's just heartbreaking what they've been through. Heartbreaking.
They deserve so much better. But I'm glad I texted Ms. Ruby, and I told her I was proud of her for her dedication and her persistence. And I told them that they deserve the world. And she said, thank you. And thank you to everybody who offered her support. I didn't muster up the courage to ask her what she got.
How much? Yeah.
I didn't ask her, but I just wanted to let her know that I was thinking about her and Shay. And she's very receptive of all the people that are in her corner and her support, that are supporting her. And she does offer a big thank you to everybody. So.
Yeah, and I wonder how winning this is going to change the environment over the next couple of years. Because that this weaponized Department of Justice and Ed Martin, the interim U.S. attorney in D.C., and M.L. Bove and Pam Bondi are going to try to relitigate 2020. And I'm wondering if that, if that's going to come up again. What happened in the arena that night, the videos, what Rudy was defaming them for, and if they're going to have to go through all of this again. And I hope that whatever they extracted from Rudy is enough to buy him an amazing private security detail for the rest of their lives. Because I'm worried about him in the coming years.
Sure. Yeah. They had very coherent, wise, competent counsel. And I believe that they made the decision with, in conjunction with their counsel that they are satisfied with. So even if it is just saying, hey, give us $100 and just leave us the hell alone. Whatever they did to prioritize what's best for them is enough for me. And that's what we talked about earlier at the beginning of the show, AG, when we talked about what it really is justice. People want the mug shots and behind bars and this and that. But a lot of times, justice can look like peace to somebody who has been struggling and suffering, going through hell so long.
Yeah. Yeah, there's a bunch of lawsuits I've been a part of that I wish could have just ended earlier. So many times, you try to walk away or mediate, but the cruelty is the point, right? To keep it going and to keep going at you and to drag it out as long as possible. And I think we're going to see a lot of that from the Trump administration. Like I said, especially with Hampton Dellinger, like all you had to do was give a reason, bro, and it'd be pretty hard to question. But instead, you want to go through this hoop jumping exercise, make people pay, get at people. The 5 bullets email, for example, how humiliating and degrading to ask, high-level government employees, even mid-level and low-level government employees, to justify what they do to somebody who they don't work for every week, to somebody like Elon Musk. It's degrading.
It's
condescending.
Slap in the face. Yep.
And then to have people who've been on telework agreements, who were hired on telework agreements or remote work agreements, to have to return to an office and be shoved in a bullpen with 6 other people at a folding table because there's no room to do your work. It's designed that way. It's designed to make you want to quit. It's designed to, it's what abusive spouses do, And my heart goes out to everybody who's had to deal with anything like this, and we're also just to everybody, because we're also dealing with it as a country. What JD Vance and Trump did to Zelensky in the Oval Office,
absolutely pathetic.
Yeah, embarrassing and disgusting, and that's their brand, right?
Yeah, they don't care. They don't care about anybody but themselves. And we're recording this, as you all know, on Monday, but on Tuesday, Donald Trump's going to be giving his speech, the State of the not an official State of the Union. I don't think it's called that in the first presidential term. It's called a joint address to Congress. But let's go see. And I'm predicting that he's going to just focus on him and that all the work, and he's going to justify what Elon Musk is doing, because that's what his hardcore base wants to hear.
Yeah. And Senator Wyden from Oregon says, I'm not going to be there. I'm going to be doing a town hall. Senator Patty Murray, Democrat from Washington, I will not be attending the Trump's address to Congress. The State of the Union is that the president is spitting in the face of the law and that he's letting an unelected billionaire fire cancer researchers and wreck federal agencies. So, there's a lot of people who are talking about what folks should do. I know AOC was like, what do you think we should do? Let us know. Yeah. And I was like, wear Ukraine blue and gold and give double barrel middle fingers, walk out in the middle of a speech. But
yeah, listen, I get people wanting to boycott it and everything like that. And that would be the story. But I think it's important, especially for our lawmakers. Me as a rebel, and I'm sure you would be like, F you, we're not going, we're going to do something. But I think it's important to make sure we're listening to what he says. And that's how we fight back against it. If you don't know potentially what he's going to do until he does it, Donald Trump is going to do some foreshadowing during that speech about things that he wants to come. And I think that gives the Democratic lawmakers an opportunity to get in front of it. So I do think, and I also heard that some of the lawmakers that are not boycotting, their special guests are going to be guests that were fired federal workers. Give them an opportunity. Not like Donald Trump cares about looking people in the face. He doesn't care, but give them an opportunity to be seen and let you know, hey, we stand with you. Even if it's just symbolic,
Yeah. Yeah. We'll see how it goes. I'm for be disruptive. Screw the norm, screw decorum, shout some stuff out in the middle of it. Like, when you're done, go out on the steps. Or turn your back for the first 10 minutes of the speech, or go out on the steps and have those fired federal workers say a few words to the cameras, or make a viral moment. I know.
Go with everybody. All Democrats should go in there with some Beats headphones. The headphones, and everybody just walk in with some AirPods in and not take them out, just have music playing and
just earmuffs.
Whatever. Yeah, just some earmuffs. like Bernie Sanders and his mittens. Yeah. Like everybody, we need a viral moment right there, guys. Democrats don't let us down,
We do. There needs to be something. And I know there's a lot of Democrats who are like old guard Democrats, and I don't mean old like age, I just mean like old guard Democrats. There's some very young old guard Democrats who are very about not having viral moments and kind of like we talked about how AOC brought up, they look down their nose at digital media and performative media and viral media. Yeah. But that's the stuff that we need right now. It was like when Dark Brandon took off, Yeah. That's what we need. And I'm going to be looking for it. So you don't have to. I would recommend not watching it at all. But because don't worry, those viral moments, you'll see clips of them on social media. It'll be out there.
They are coming. Yeah.
Yeah. All right, my friend. It's been wonderful. As always.
Great show, AG. Yep.
And we'll be back for the bonus this weekend.
This weekend. It's not too late. No, not this week. Like I said, I was in Kansas last week. And actually, while I was out there, it was really interesting. The Kansas Democratic crowd, like everybody thinks Kansas is red state, but they're led by a 2-term Democratic governor out there. And I'm always impressed by Democratic governors in red states. Andy Beshear is another one that comes to mind. But also, while I was out there giving a keynote address to the Democrats, It's spread. I got a request to come to Oklahoma and do the same thing. So going to these bright red states and letting them know that, hey, we're not quitting, we're not stopping. And I like standing with those red dots and blue and blue dots and red states. We see you, and we will continue to keep fighting for you.
Yeah, and that's what we should be doing, right? All these Republicans getting booed off the stages at their town halls in ruby red districts by Republicans because they're mad about what Musk is doing. Send a Democrat out there. Tell them what we're about.
Also, another thing, to address a misnomer that people think, those are paid people, blah, blah, blah. And a lot of times with these town halls, you have to be a constituent to attend. Is that you have to put your address, you have to put your zip code, everything. You can't just show up and walk in. So when Mike Johnson and the other talking heads say these are paid protesters, no. A lot of time, I can't say every time, but majority of the time to attend these town halls, you have to be a constituent of that district.
Yeah, I'm sure the guy who said, "Hey, I'm not a Democrat, but I care about the veterans," was
exactly. Actor. Like, wait a minute, yeah.
Anyway, guys, we'll see you this weekend if you're a patron. And I think you were about to say it's not too late to join.
To be a patron, absolutely. Make sure y'all sign up. Aisle45. Give them the link, AG.
Patreon.com/Aisle45pod. AISLE45POD. The number 4, the number 5. So that's where you can become a patron and support us and support independent media, support what we do. And we'll be seeing you this weekend if you are a patron. If not, we'll see you next week. Yeah,
that's right. That sounds good.
All right, everybody. We'll see you then. I'm Allison Gill.
Harry Dunn. Thanks, y'all.
Cleanup on Aisle 45 is written, researched, and produced by Allison Gill with editing by Molly Hockey. Our art and logo design are by Joelle Reeder and Moxie Design Studios, and our music is composed and performed by Adam Orr. Cleanup on Aisle 45 is a proud member of the MSW Media Network, a collection of creator-owned podcasts dedicated to news, politics, and justice. For more information, visit mswmedia.com. MSW Media.